What you're going to see is testimony by State Senator Mike Ellis and Senator John Erpenbach in favor of campaign finance reform. These two have been leading the fight for the past 10 years to get private money out of politics so that the public can pay for our campaigns and better people will run for public office. The good news is that part of this bill passed. I say passed because it passed the state Senate by a lopsided 23-10 vote, but it will not come up in the Assembly and therefore cannot become a law in time to help us with the April 1st election that is now scheduled between Louis Butler and his opponent. The Republican leaders know that it will pass in the Assembly if it's put to a vote, so therefore, because they oppose it, they will not let people vote on it.
Unfortunately, because of the way we fund elections, the public interest gets a backseat to 10 to 15 very powerful special interests. Now, they have rights, and so do the 5.5 million people of the state. And when you have the dumping of an inordinate amount of money through these interest groups into both Democrat and Republican legislative races, you have a tendency to suffocate, literally suffocate, the rights of the individual who may pony up $5 or $10 or $50 or whatever the case may be.
By our accounting, looking at all the TV ad buys and doing the best we can to put a number to the volumes of advertising that's done in election campaigns, by our best accounting, some $15 million flowed under the radar in 2006. Some $15 million was spent secretly to influence Wisconsin elections. And then in the April 2000 state Supreme Court race, again, by our best estimate, about $3 million flew under the radar, was spent secretly to determine the outcome of that election.
We've asked Ron Skolansky, Senior Staff Attorney with the Wisconsin Legislative Council, to give us a brief overview of the various elements that you'll find in these bills, as well as Senate Bill 171.
There are a number of ingredients in Senate Bill 12 that represent a lot of compromises between the parties, but the issue at the public finance campaigns are the two big points of Senate Bill 12.
We're here to talk about Senate Bill 12 fundamentally. We first started this quest to flush the special interest groups out of an inordinate influence over our legislative process back in 1999. And a quick history, since 1999, through both political parties at one point or another having control of the state Senate, we've only actually had one substantive vote on the subject of campaign finance reform, which is embodied in Senate Bill 12. My view of this is quite simple. We're taking in excess of $13.5 billion a year from the people of this state through the general purpose revenue stream. The largest single item, of course, is the income tax at around $8 billion. The sales tax generates $4 to $5 billion, and then we have another assortment. We're taking an awful lot of money in the name of the public interest. As a conservative Republican, I believe that one of the reasons we have the fiscal mess we have in Wisconsin, we've had it for almost 9 years, so it transcends Jim Doyle, goes back to McCallum, starts with Tommy, is that neither political party has the freedom to exercise their initiatives to bring our budget into balance. We are, in effect, gridlocked, owing our votes to the interest groups that finance elections. And I believe a modest contribution from the 5.5 million people that make up this state to guarantee that those funds are spent in the public interest and that no special interest has an inordinate influence over the disbursement of their $13 billion is a very wise move. There were surveys done recently that stated that a vast majority of the people of Wisconsin believe that the legislature, the governor, and that their democracy in general is controlled by special interest groups. We have to reestablish that cord of belief between the people who are governed and those that they send to Madison.
And if you take a look at the spending in campaigns right now, we can't really get to the numbers because the TV stations legally don't have to tell us how much is spent, but all you have to do is turn on the TV to see it's a lot. That on a percentage basis, the fastest rising cost of any campaign isn't what the candidate raises, it's what these issue advocates are raising through corporations, through illegal donations, and running commercials all over the place. And we have no control over that. Citizens have no control over that. And in the end, what Mike was talking about, turning people off, the perception is killing us. As elected officials, it's killing us.
I want to say a word about the provision of this special session bill that deals with a Supreme Court a little closer to home. Our state Supreme Court is operating under an ethical cloud. It has a huge problem facing it because of the way our campaigns have degenerated for state Supreme Court. We're going to see another one here in a few weeks. We now have a court where justices increasingly face the prospect of becoming part-time judges because they'll have to constantly look at recusing themselves when cases come before them that it happen to involve big campaign contributors. The alternative is that they stay on these cases and they decide to rule on them, then there will be a cloud hanging over those rulings because people will begin to suspect that those judges are not simply accountable to the law and the Constitution, but they're accountable to political parties and they're accountable to wealthy special interest groups. This is an ethical cloud that must be addressed, and this legislation addresses it. Already we're seeing Wisconsin residents express deep concern about the integrity of our court system. The Republican polling firm I mentioned, American Viewpoint, found that only 5% of Wisconsin residents believe that campaign contributions made to judges don't influence their decisions. Only 5%. The vast majority of people in the state have already reached the conclusion that campaign contributions and the money in these judicial campaigns matters, that it does have an effect on these judges, and I think that is why the entire Supreme Court, from the most conservative justice to the most liberal, have signed a letter begging the legislature to act and create publicly financed Supreme Court elections. Certainly the people back this. Polling done for the National Group Justice at Stake found that 65% of state residents support public financing of state Supreme Court races. Interestingly, when they were told reasons either to support it or oppose it, when they were told what's good about it and what's bad about it, the support went up to 75%. So a clear majority, a vast majority of people want this kind of reform. The Supreme Court and its justices need to be freed from the inevitable conflicts of interest that are the natural byproducts of the current system.
If you get this up before a vote in front of the Senate, it passes. And I think if you get it up in front of the Assembly, I think it passes. And I think it passes with pretty strong bipartisan numbers because good, solid campaign finance reform that treats both sides equally, that treats everybody equally is the best way to go and the most, certainly the fairest way to go.
I have said that in terms of campaign finance reform. I think I told both of you, I feel like this year we're moving the ball from the 30-yard line to the 50, and maybe we can punch it through, next session or even this session. Things do happen. But truthfully, I think that by having this hearing and the eventual exec on it, I think we're actually punching this thing across the 50-yard line, and we're making some tremendous progress. The ban on PAC-to-PAC transfers, that is a sticking point with I don't know, I wouldn't say leaders, but especially good fundraisers in both parties know that, this is language that may cause them some head scratching. Either one of you want to talk about why it is or isn't a good idea?
Well, it's not a good idea to have a super PAC pack out, shift money to X, Y, Z, and let them start all over. It's a dodge. It's a dodge. And, as for the leaders, and I was the leader from 1988 to 2000, and, I have to say this, the worst part of that 12-year stretch was the money chase and how at the end of each day, as leader, you had responsibilities to help raise funds. He was the leader. He understands what I'm talking about. But it leaves you with a quiet disgust for the process. And there is no one in the assembly from either political party, nor in the state senate from either political party, that cannot go back home to their districts and for the most part be well respected and believable in terms of their honesty and integrity and with that relationship with their constituents. Then they get on their mopeds or their bicycles or their SUVs and they converge on this citadel of democracy. And when they get here, especially the newer ones, they get swept up in this idea that their talents, their initiatives, their intelligence didn't bring them to this bastion of democracy. It was Big Mike Ellis, the majority leader of the state senate, who got on the phone and called all these interest groups and poured money into their districts. Or Big John Erpenbach got the job done for them. And leadership has a tendency to control their memberships by creating this artificial illusion that their success is dependent on leadership. Nothing could be further from the truth. Good, thoughtful individuals who bond with their constituents can win an election on a shoestring if we have a level playing field.
Ordinary citizens and groups would face prison sentences for even mentioning a politician's name in an ad within 60 days.
Oh.
The only way to avoid this kind of punishment is to submit to, and this is what I want to ask you about, unreasonable, unwieldy, and complicated state-mandated regulations.
Here's the deal. They're called issue advocacy groups. They talk about issues. They don't talk about Mike Ellis or John Erpenbach. They're supposed to talk about the issue. They're supposed to raise awareness amongst the voters about an issue. Not about Mike, not about John, not about Senator Kreitlow. They can talk about me all they want, but if they're going to talk about me, they need to play by the same kind of rules that I have to play by. If Mike and I are running against each other and I'm running an ad against Mike, you know where my money's coming from, just like you know where his money's coming from. But these issue advocate, you know, we've talked about these ads. Usually an unflattering black and white grainy photo with this kind of Jaws music in the background, talking about, you know, an issue for 2 seconds and then getting on to something totally different about the candidate. I want to hear about the issue. I want to know what the issues are that are important to this group. I don't care where the candidate stands on those issues. That's my job to try and find out. So if everybody plays by the rules, nobody's going to jail. There are probably some people right now who have obviously found a way to punch through some of the laws and some of the rules that we have to play by, obviously, which is why we're seeing so much corporate money coming into this state. But if this becomes law, it's not this overburdened thing. It's really simple. You use a name, a likeness, or a face, you report. If you talk about the issue, you don't. It's really simple.
On the issue ads, people that run issue ads are trying to curry favor with the voters to sell a pro or a con position on a specific issue. Their objective and their goal ought to be to convince the public that an issue is bad or that an issue is good. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is fine. That's democracy. But every single legislator and every single governor that has run in the last 8 years are getting inundated with these phony issue ads, which are not issue ads, they're attack ads.
Now, you're going to hear over and over again critics say that public financing of state election campaigns is wrong. They're going to say that forcing taxpayers to finance elections is inappropriate. That is not only a lame excuse for inaction, but it is crassly hypocritical. We already pay through the nose for election campaigns. Taxpayers pay every time a tax break is enacted, every time a slice of budget pork goes into a budget bill. We are paying huge sums of money to reward campaign contributors, and all of us, whether we like those public policies or not, we are paying for that. The issue before you is not whether taxpayers should pay for elections. We always will, one way or another. The real issue before you is ownership. Who is going to own our elections and who is going to own our state government? We can either have voter-owned elections or we can have special interest-owned elections. This special session bill gives us voter-owned elections.